Shevuot Daf Yoram Amud Aleph, 18 lines down. Today's daf sponsored Mr. Rimin Zain in honor of his grandson Ray V. Rabbi Meir Omer Kol Seirim Kapatan Shel Rabbi Meir said all the kaparot of the goats are the same to be mechaper the tumah of walking in Bet Hamikdash. Rabbi Hama, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Meir hold they're all the same. Amar Kral Pasuk says Seir Usir the Vav. Ukshu Kol Seirim Lezen they're all equated to each other, all the goats. The Vav and Mosif and Ayan because the Vav of Us'ir connects the previous topic of Pesach, which includes the Rosh Chodesh, and therefore we have a connection. It sounds like right now that you're learning it separately, A to B, B to C, D to E, like one from Rosh Chodesh to the Chag, etc. Rabbi Yochanan says, you can learn from A to B to C, except for Kodashim. You can't do that. So if A, we learn A to B, B does not transfer to C. It has to be directly from A. The Gemara says, Lakashya, Lakashya sounds to Kulu Mikama Gamli, all learn from the same. The first halacha, they all learn directly from the halacha of Rosh Chodesh, and you're not transferring it over to separate steps. It's all A to B. The Gemara says, Tanach, Kol Tekab Be'ezir. That makes sense. So only according to the only when it says usir. I said Yom Kippurim lo tav usir by Shavuot and Yom Kippur where it does not mention the vav, just as regular God. Who says the same halacha apply? The Gemara says Ela Rabbi Yonah. Amar Kara. The pasuk says Ela ta'asu laHashem b'mo'adeichev. You shall do this for Hashem on your chag. Ukshu kol mo'adim kulan zazeh. All the hagim are compared to each other. The Gemara says V'ra Rosh Chodesh la mo'adetu. Rosh Chodesh is not a chag. Rashi says, Ibra Rosh Chodesh nami ikra moed. Yet we actually do call Rosh Chodesh achad. For example, the Gemara Rabbi says, Tammuz dehahishat hamalui maliyahu. That year, Bedin made Tammuz a full month of 30 days. Doesn't usually happen. This happened when Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim. And it was actually the year Moshe sent the Meraglim. And that's how 30 days later the timing worked out that they cried about the spies' reports on Shabbat. V'tiv kara alay moed leshkor b'huray. Okay, Mar Yochanan. The mayor holds that the goat, the first goat that's done inside the Bet HaMikdash, on Yom Kippur, shehu eno mechaper kavaratan, it doesn't give kapara. V'hen ana mechapim nekarato. It doesn't, the kapara doesn't do each other's halachot. It only does its own one. It doesn't do the other one. Only does one, not two. The other one doesn't do it for it. Amar kra ahad v'shnan has one tamir kapara zu lo ti'eh chamishna only one ziyah. Where it says Tanakhi, but it says the same thing. Ash en b'yediyah lo b'tchila b'zof. In the case for the Tumah in Beit HaMikdash, if he did not know at all before or after, he didn't know before, but he knows afterward. A person who ate tameh hekdesh. According to the Meir, the goats of the Hagim, the goats of the Chodesh, or the goat inside the Bet HaMikdash, Yom Kippur, is mechaper. But it didn't mention the goat done out inside the Bet HaMikdash. Only the outside one. The kaperatan nami shayir left out the kapara for that case. This is referred to proof that it doesn't work. Okay. Rabbi Shimon said in the next part of the Mishnah that the goat of Rosh Chodesh gives kapara for a Tahor person who ate something that was tameh, hekdesh tameh. Now, how come Rosh Chodesh, according to the Meir, according to the Bishimon, doesn't transfer from Rosh Chodesh to the Chag? Tamar kra avon, because it mentions sin. Avon echad hu only does for one sin. They don't say avon doesn't cover two sins. Ela the Reglim, according for the Chagim, nechapru ad Rosh Chodeshim. How come it doesn't transfer to Rosh Chodesh? How come Rosh Chodesh only does it for something else? The Gemara says Amar kra ota and avon only works for that thing. Okay. Based on the Reglim, now it makes sense why Hagim, the Shlosh Regalim Hagim Korbanot doesn't transfer to Yom Kippur. The Amakra Habashna because it's once a year. However, Kaparaz will tell Habashna. The Yom Kippurim, but for Yom Kippur, the goat of Yom Kippur, Nechapro Regalim. Why doesn't it work for the other Regalim? Where it says Amakra Achat, Kapara Achat, doesn't work for two in Yom Kippur. Where it says Haketiva Achat, but when it says one, it only is talking about the goat inside the Bet HaMikdash. And now we're talking about the goat outside. So how come we can't say that it works and it transfers? Where it says, it says, except for the inner korban. we compare the outer to the inner, and therefore they both have their own one type of, they only do one type of avera, and it doesn't transfer for further. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon mentioned in our Mishnah that the goats of Rosh Chodesh is mechaper someone who accidentally ate kosher food, hegdesh tameh food. Where it says, how come according to Rabbi Shimon that the goats on Rosh Chodesh the lo mechaper doesn't transfer to Chag? Damar kra avon echad hu noseh ve'eno noseh shni avon only covers one sin. If that's the case, then the Chagim one shouldn't cover Rosh Chodesh. Why? Because the word says the pasuk says it. Shouldn't cover this one. The word says the word ota according to Rabbi Shimon doesn't mean anything to him. He doesn't think that it means to exclude elsewhere. The where it says according to Hagim though, that doesn't transfer Yom Kippur. Because once a year. That's okay. Yom Kippur therefore Yom Kippur shouldn't transfer to the Chag. Why? A Chag tip only mentions once. Yani one. For two. So how come Rish Shimon allows the Yom Kippur to transfer for the other Avirot? The Gemara says, again, he also does hold that the word Ahad over there doesn't transfer. He doesn't learn out Ota and doesn't learn Ahad, which we've been learning really according to other opinions. Amai, how come he doesn't hold one Ahad means anything? Because when it says one, it only mentions the inner one. And in other words, elsewhere, other rabbis say that yeah, but it says over there, but it transfers to the outer one as well. Okay, if that's the case, the Chagim korbanot should do mechaper what the korban of Yom Kippur does. It only mentions the one and the inner one. But Rabbi Shimon, however, says that the goats of Chagim do not transfer to Yom Kippur. Why not? Where it says Le'olam Achad Mashman, literally he learns the word Achad. V'shani Acha over here it's different. Demar Krab Pasuk says V'chipera Haron al Kananotava Achad V'shana. He shall bring the korban on the mizbeach once a year to teach you. Kananotav the mizbeach hapinimi hu de kapara Achad mechaper ve'enu mechaper shtei kaparot. The korban that is put on the horns of the mizbeach. That korban is only done once and can do two different types of kaparot. But the one on the outside can do two or more. Okay, finally, new topic. Amar Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan Timidin Shelo Tzrichu Lasibur. Right, so you used to have a set amount of korbanot that was brought every single day for Hashem. Korban Tamid, twice a day. That's at the end. They couldn't transfer from year to year on year. Every year they would have to, if you had leftover from the previous year, they would keep extras just in case. And you couldn't just get rid of them. They're hegdesh. So nifdin timim, you're allowed to redeem them even though they don't have a mum. Usually you have to redeem them to have a mum. All right, these animals are bought with the mahafta shekel, and it has to be used that year. So if they've been used, you redeem it, even though there's no mum. The Gemara says, Rabbi sat down, he repeated to Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Hizda said, Man tzayit lecha Rabbi Yochanan Rabbah. Who is listening to this halacha? I don't understand who even agreed to this. Yes, you're redeeming the kiddusha on the animal, but the physical kiddusha can't be removed. What, you're paying it off? If the animals cost $1,000, you're transferring it to the money? How does that work? Where it says, remember this, we're gonna have this repeating question later on. Marley system, Atlo tisbira, don't you also hold the law minan kiddusha sheben lecha? And then he says, one second, and don't you hold? He's doubling down. He says, but you also hold that you can't transfer. Vatan Mishnah says, Motara ketoret maya isubo. That when there used to be leftover ketoret, the incense, they used to have it for the next year. How would they reuse it for the next year? We couldn't just save it. They would set aside the amount of money in machzor shekels to pay the people who made it, the artists who made the ketoret, and they would give it to them. They would say, okay, this no longer belongs to the Mikdash. This money is now your wages. Then take the ketoret and buy it out, the kiddusha, with that money that was given over. And then give the incense as to these artists as their payment. Then rebuy it with their new money, with new hafta shekels. The reason why they have to do this whole procedure is because they didn't want this falling into other people's hands. They didn't want it to get bizayon. They have to do this in and out. However, we see from here, according to the Hizdah, why you have to do this at all. Maybe you can't redeem it at all. Where would the kiddusha go? But yet you do have to see this. So we see that you can transfer kiddusha. Says the Marle, ketoret kamar, ketoret, shining ketoret is different. Why? The kiddusha the mimu. because the kedusha of the ketoret has money kedusha, not physical. Right? Now we're starting to talk about, oh, you want to talk about kedusha? There's two different types of kedusha. One item in essence is kadosh, physicality, and one item is the value. So we said kedusha v'ketoret is not the essence; it's the value. Therefore, we could buy and sell. And if that's the case, lo tip yasel b'tful yom. If that's the case, then how come if it's tibul yom, which means a guy who is waiting to become tahor after becoming tameh, he didn't go into the mikveh yet. So if he touches something, it becomes pasul or tameh. Um, how come though? He says, "Lama Tanakh," Beretta says, "Lama Tanakh, Nitanah b'mechtashet nimsa b'tim." If the Ketorah was placed on something in the Beit HaMikdash, the Tilu Yom can make it tameh. And why is that a question? Because if we never found something that technically is not fully kadosh, only money kadosh, that could be tameh by a person by a Tilu Yom. It's a very low level tuma. The Gemara says, if you want to tell me any money kedusha item can be disqualified through tuliyom. Vatana Mishnah says, the korban mincha is able to be is able to have me'ilah, which means is able, if you use it, you're chayav me'ilah, which means you're stealing from Hekdesh. So when is a person chayav from stealing from Hekdesh if he uses the korban mincha? Is once the items are made hekdesh verbally by the owner. Kochel if you put it in, if you made it kadosh by putting it into the vessel of Bet Hamikdash, they also become able to be disqualified by the Tivul Yom. Putting more a person who also he dipped himself in the mikveh. He's not just Tivul Yom, he dipped himself in the mikveh, but he didn't bring korban still. Or through being kept overnight. All these things can make it tameh. The Gemara says, sounds like only if you put it in the vessel, it makes it kadosh. Lo if you're not put in the vessel, it does not become kadosh, and it can't be disqualified by Tiful Yom. So how come the previous Brayta said that it can't be disqualified by Tiful Yom if he touches it? Sounds like there is physical kedusha, not just money. Gemara says that. So what do you want to say? Kedusha go for that there's physical kedusha, and if that's the case, so if that's the case, then once the keturah is left overnight, it should become pasul. Alama Tanan, why did the Mishnah say hakometz, the flour of a korban mincha, v'halivuna, or the ketoret, the frankincense, v'haketoret, the actual ketoret, uminhat kohanim, the mincha of the kohanim, uminhat kon mashuach, the mincha of the korban mincha of the anointed kohen, uminhat nechasim, or the korban mincha with libations, mu'alim behen mehukushu dashu, they are all chayav me'ilah once they are made hekdesh verbally. Kochubikli, if they put it in the vessel, they also become kadosh. And they're also able to become basul through Tivul Yom. And also a person who is who did not bring a korban, like we said. Ulvina, or if it's left overnight as well. The Gemara says in sounds like only if you left it overnight. Sorry, only if you put it in the vessel, the Midrash becomes kadosh. Lo kochubikli, lo didn't. It would not be chayav. So we see from here that the item doesn't make the item physical kadosh. Gemara says, "Amarle lina kamar." You bring me a proof from just leaving it overnight. Shani Ketoret is different. Incense is different. Since it doesn't spoil, it's just spices. You don't turn and see moldy spices. Therefore, there is no such thing as leaving things overnight. The concept of leaving something overnight only applies by korbanot and stuff. That was being spoiled. The Ketorah doesn't have that. We'll stop here.